Well, I want to start off. I know there's still some people joining in, so I want to start off by telling everybody thank you for taking the time on your Thursday afternoon to spend the day with us. I know that there's a lot of changes going on with the world that we're in today, and although it sounds repetitive, I do hope that everybody's staying safe and continuing to stay healthy. Today's topic, we're going to be focusing on the downside of working 100% remote from a psychologist perspective. So we do have Dr. Nima Moyedi here that will be speaking throughout on some of the topic areas that we also heard from our audience. We had a lot of people sending in messages on some key areas that you all were interested in hearing about. So we'll focus on a lot of that today. But I do want to kind of set the stage a little bit. So we at Auzmor are not anti working remote. We're 100% for working remote, and we've had our team's working remote for quite some time. So this is more, our goal with this webinar was to kind of have it more educational, because we just kind of, from our experience at Auzmor, when we did have a lot of people, working remote prior to even COVID, there was a lot of challenges that we ran into with just, kind of with different things that you deal with when people are working remote and you're not face to face. So our goal is really to make sure that some of the issues that we ran into, you guys don't face those. And if you do, what are maybe some good practices that you guys could follow? So my name is Ziaz Gary, and I'll be your guys' host today. I'm the Director of Business Development and Partnerships here at Auzmor. And then we also have Dr. Nima Moyedi here today. He's a clinical psychologist at Psychology Works, Inc. And he's a subject matter expert licensed by the California Board of Psychology. He does have over 11 years of experience, so I think he's a great person to be able to speak on a lot of these things today. We also have Nick Redden joining us today, Vice President of American Technology Consulting. He is an enthusiast, technology writer, and a speaker, and we're really glad to have Nick on board because I think he can definitely talk about some of his experiences with working remote, so I think we're very glad to have him here as well with us. Nick does have more than 15 years of experience, so I did want to mention that as well. So that's definitely something good to know, and he'll be great to chime in throughout these conversations. We also have Mike Van Boren. Mike, I may have said your last name slightly wrong, but he is a e-learning strategist at Go1, and he helps organizations navigate through their digital learning goals. And he'll be great to kind of talk more through the learning aspects and what are the shifts that we've seen through the training aspect through some of the COVID areas. And he also has more than 10 years of experience, so we're very glad to have him on board today. Quickly, a little bit about Auzmor. So Auzmor is an HR SaaS software company. We have a couple of different focus areas that we primarily focus on. So we have our Auzmor Learn product, which is our LMS. So that's kind of our bread and butter. That is basically our learning platform, which helps centralize and report and track on all of your training. We also have our Auzmor Hire product, which is our applicant tracking system. So that's our recruitment platform. And then we also have Covalent, which is our HR marketplace. So a couple of key things that we'll focus in on today is the first and foremost is understanding the employee behaviors that may come with remote work. So that's the first big key area, how it's going to be impacting leaders today and what to expect in the future. How much as employers and leaders should we be emphasizing on employee mental health? And then if these issues are not acknowledged, what are some things that we may see possibly from a productivity perspective or a churn perspective as well? And like we were saying earlier, what are some best practices that we can follow as well? So to kind of kick off, I know we have Nick Redden here, so I kind of wanted to start with having Nick kind of chime in a little bit on this. Nick, I know ATC has been working remote for quite some time, so what are some benefits that you guys have seen, and what has been your guys' strategy to making it successful?
Yeah, with a lot of the work that we do, working remotely definitely has its benefits, because a lot of people, again, when they're coding, when they're writing software, depending on what they're doing, everybody's body, mind kind of functions in different ways at different times. Being able to work from home allows you to really kind of meet that throughput goal that you have and be able to meet it at the time that you want to. So if you want to go to the gym from 10 to noon, you can do that, because you can make up your coding at other times when you're really more on. For a lot of folks, sometimes that's at night. Sometimes from 10 to midnight is or 10 to 2. Some people that they're just total night owls, and other people are early morning. So it really allows you to kind of work, and as long as you're meeting the goals of your team that they've discussed, and getting your code in on time, or whatever it is that you're standing up that day, making sure that everything's done when it's supposed to be done, and you're working ahead of those goals. It gives you the complete flexibility to kind of meet your work goals the way that you want to, which is important for a lot of people. Obviously, it drives retention, it drives engagement, and those are all good things. And then, of course, the things you have on the screen are great as well. It allows people to spend time with their kids, whether it's picking them up from school. Of course, now with everything that's going on, it may be helping them with school and allowing them to do other tasks as pertinent at night.
Yes, I agree, Nick. Those are great points. From talking to employees, Nick, have they given you any like specific feedback, or do you guys at ATC make it optional to where they can work from home if they want, and then are you guys doing it to where people can come to the office, or how are you guys going about that piece?
Honestly, it's both. They can come to the office if they want to. If they don't, or right now, because of things that may be going on with their school districts and all those things that we never thought we'd actually have to think about, they can work from home as well. We try to do office check-ins when we can, just to kind of keep the engagement high, and face-to-face we do believe is important. In some instances, though, folks will work completely remote, and that's absolutely fine as well. But we do try to give the option, because we do want to keep engagement high. We want to, again, meet people the way that they want to work. And if they express, hey, I really like being in the office, then obviously, please come on in. And, it's where I'm at today. So it works out well, I think, for everybody to give them kind of that hybrid approach and flexibility. Now, that we do know, of course, as a father of 6, with 3 of my kids in the world of work, that's not feasible for every job or every company. There's a lot of professions that you have to come in no matter what, or that company can't run. And so we are in a position where we're able to allow people to work hybrid, but no, that's not feasible.
Yes, no, that's a great point, Nick. And to your points there, Nick, right? We actually pulled some stats from Buffer survey, and we had some pretty interesting numbers. So nearly 48%. Half of employees had said that they'll work remotely at least some of the time. 99% admitted to the fact that if they could, they would work remotely for the rest of their careers. 95% would influence and encourage their friends or family members to work remote as well. And 42% had stated that remote workers intend to operate remotely more frequently in the future as well. And then 77% of remote workers claim to be more productive when they are working from their homes. What are your thoughts with some of these stats?
I think it's very driven by the job that you do. If you have a fairly routine job to some sense, I think that's very doable. Like, we're headquartered here in Des Moines. We're surrounded by 250 insurance companies that are headquartered here. A lot of that work is very standardized work that those folks are doing. So doing it from home, they'll be very productive, very happy, very like it. If you've got sales folks, it can be a little bit tougher depending on how motivated they are. Sometimes they need to be around a team atmosphere, or need to have management close by just to either brainstorm, share ideas. It gets a little bit more challenging when you're in a work from home environment, and you've got to take extra steps to be able to kind of make those connections and get that ideation going. So I think some of it's very role related, and a lot of the roles probably don't need a tremendous amount of creativity on the fly, or ability to gel with other folks or have ideas going on. Where we've heard, and where I've heard from a lot of the large enterprises that I deal with, where they're struggling from a technology employee standpoint, is because they typically do a lot of in-person huddles, that they call them, or in-person stand-ups, to talk about ideas, to talk about where things are at, where the roadblocks are, where things need to be worked out. And that's that lack of that, or lack of the way that it's working through technology right now for a lot of companies, is they really want to get people back inside, because that piece of it, and again, it's kind of an ideation piece to some degree, problem solving to some degree, whiteboarding to a large degree, is kind of taking a hit, and a lot of companies are expressing that they're really feeling that. So I think it really depends, and it's really, there's a job relational aspect to it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that, Nick. And what would you say, I guess, from like what have been, of course, like you were saying earlier, different roles have different struggles with it, right? With working remote. So what are some struggles that you guys have dealt with at ATC, or possibly have had some challenges with?
Yeah, I think it's the list that you have here. What I ask people, do you feel like you're working from home or living at the office? Because there is a difference.
Yep.
you definitely want people to work from home, but it's not necessarily feasible. And I can use my oldest son as an example. Him and his wife are currently both working from home, and they live in a small 2-bedroom apartment. That's not great, right? You pretty much feel like you're living at the office more than you are anything else. And they do have to take breaks and step outside and do things. So it's a little different. It could be a struggle at a time to stay motivated. You've got you're together 24/7. Nothing wrong with that. They're married. That's great. But these kinds of things happen. So feeling like you can unplug can be challenging for them, at least in the jobs that they do. They do have distractions because they've got 3 pets, which are very active pets. 2 dogs and a cat. So I think it's just a little bit different. I think there's a lot of struggles that, depending on your situation. For me, it's a lot different. When I work from home, I have, in my house, I do have my own office. So for me, it's a lot easier, and I can sit there and go, hey, this should be great for everybody. But the reality is, for a lot of folks, it really depends on their situation at home, how big their house is. If they're surrounded by kids all day, are they able to overcome those struggles and still maintain the structure that they want with all the challenges currently going on because of COVID?
Yeah, no, I agree, Nick. Those are great points for sure. Dr. Moyedi, I kind of wanted to bring you in on this piece a little bit. So what are some key, I guess, for you, how do you think the office dynamics have changed with some of the changes that organizations are facing today?
Good question. Yeah. So yeah, office dynamics have changed. You have people who are more introverted. They're going to have a more difficult time expressing opinions, participating in discussions. So as managers, we need to make sure that extroverts aren't dominating the conversation. This is especially true when you compare audio only to audio and video communication. So those who are introverts tend to struggle more on video because they have increased levels of anxiety related to the feeling that they need to perform on camera. So managers are encouraged to kind of mediate the discussions and allow everyone to have a voice. People need to feel that their voice, their opinion, their perspective carries weight, and it adds value to the business.
Yep, no, that's a great point, Dr. Moyedi. I know for us, we kind of try to make it optional for certain people or just for employees in general, if some want to have it on versus off. But no, that's really a good point with the different personalities. How do you, so with some of the changes that organizations are facing with this piece, how do you think that this is impacting employees' psychological well-being? Since, I guess as humans, we naturally tend to want to be around people, and the human interaction is so important and something that we're so used to. So suddenly all that's taken away from us. How could this impact overall employee well-being?
So employees who are forced to rapidly shift to remote work, they're going to be more vulnerable to feelings of uncertainty and feeling overwhelmed. So the problems that arise from being in a less structured environment and having disruptions in routine work activities. Nick was actually talking a little bit about that, some stressors at home. So once we have a loss of routine and reduced social interactions with others, this has shown to cause boredom, frustration, and feelings of isolation. Employees are likely to feel less supported, have increased perception of being left out, have less reliance on a team, resulting in increased anxiety, which leads to procrastination.
Got it. Okay. And how much emphasis should employers be putting on employee mental health and making sure that they're educating employees, and what are some things that they should be looking for?
That's a great question. So the more healthy the workforce, the greater the return on investment for the company. Education and access to care are going to be essential for the well-being of the individual, in turn for the company as a whole. So some of the things that we want to look at, so for employees, are you having a more difficult time disconnecting from work at the end of the day? I mean, Nick said it very well. Are you working from home, or are you living at work? Are you having difficulties with sleep? Sleep is a huge indicator. Any kind of disruptions with sleep, either sleeping too much, hypersomnia, problems falling asleep, insomnia, or even disrupted sleep where we're just waking up throughout the night, those things are going to affect our day-to-day activities, our mood, our energy levels. Are we less productive? And with productivity, are we working longer hours trying to get the same amount of work done? These are all things that have come up with remote work when people are struggling.
Talking to clients, Dr. Moyetti, I think that's definitely some things that we've I think heard about quite a bit. Mike, have you, I guess from a training perspective, have you kind of seen any specific increases in these key areas that Dr. Moyetti is talking about, or what have you noticed?
Yeah, I think the expectation when COVID happened is that we can do this. Working from home is going to be very similar. And as long as they have the tools and resources to do it, they can be successful. And yet what we've seen as we looked at our training stack and across Go1's customer base as far as what type of training content was being consumed, you can see mental health training was very low on the radar. It was more general business development, leadership management skills, and so forth. That's changed over time since that's taken place to where now kind of that after shifting, there's really been two phases. It's been the shifting to what the new COVID new normal is, and now the second phase, kind of July to November, December, is finding that better normal. And we're seeing a massive increase in the amount of IT skills that are being taught and trained. We're seeing a massive increase in the amount of communication and leadership, working from home, resilience type training, as well as a lot of mental health and awareness training. So in mental health and mental awareness training is probably more up in that 25% range right now across customers.
That was my next question for you, Mike. I was just actually about to ask you is, I know previously, just even talking to mutual clients, it was not something that, as employers, we put very much emphasis to, or just talking to clients, we didn't see very much attraction to. But over, I would say the past, I maybe like even 6 months or so, I think there has been like a huge shift, and that's an area that a lot of employers are really, I think, trying to, as much as they can, put emphasis on. So that I was just going to actually ask you, what are the percentage increases that you've noticed?
Yeah, we've seen a large increase in there. Like I said, with the mental health training, we've seen HR compliance, which was a significant portion. That's actually decreased quite a bit during this time as other topics have increased, so forth. But as I look at the chat, we've got a chat here from Laura talking about vacation, being able to take vacation and not feeling like they have the ability to take a day off because they're at home. And what are you going to do anyways? You're at home. You're not really needing a day off. The reality is you are, right? We need to be able to take a break from what we're doing. And the better trained managers are, the more aware employees are of the need to allow our brains to take a break, the better off we will be. Because, right, we may be in phase 2 and finding a better normal, and yet there's going to be a phase 3 when offices reopen and we can start going back to work. And we may see a big shuffle of talent as people go and try to find organizations or roles that better fit with their desired setup and philosophy.
Yep, no, those are great points, Mike. I'd love to hear from the audience and everybody. Feel free to comment, one in the chat box if you have been emphasizing more on providing mental health training to your workforce, and 2, if it's something you haven't, but something that you are interested in possibly doing, because we're definitely noticing a big trend here. Just wanted to Dr. Moyetti, just wanted to get, we pulled some of these stats from TELUS International, and it was pretty interesting to some of what Mike was saying there. How do you think that some of this is going to be impacting employee retention, and what are some resources that employers could be providing to employees to be able to help them out? And to that point that, Mike was also saying, maybe something as simple as even, hey, maybe they should be taking a day or 2 off, and although they're home, just to people are just getting in a habit of working so much. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so mental health matters in today's remote workforce. So a majority of workers, so based on this TELUS International publication, a majority of workers, 80%, said that they would consider quitting their current position for a job that focuses more on employee mental health. So this survey of 1,000 Americans The research indicated that 75% of US workers have struggled at work due to anxiety, which was caused by COVID-19. The survey also found that 4 out of 5 workers find it hard to shut off in the evenings. Half of those who responded, half of the respondents who were surveyed have taken a mental health day since they started working from home due to the pandemic. Half of the respondents cite that their sleep patterns were interrupted, and 45% say that they feel less healthy mentally while working from home. So there's a couple of things that we are able to do. And this kind of goes back to the question that was asked about vacation. We need to create flexible work schedules. We need to have clear expectations and policies. If we can set clear policies and expectations for people, they're going to know what they're going to need to, what they're expected of. When are they expected to show up for work? For how long? How often are they needing to communicate with managers? How does vacation time work? How does time off work? All of these questions are going to help with retention.
Yep, I know the stats were crazy, Dr. Moetti, when we were going through this. So no, that's, I think, great to share with everybody. So I know that, every organization is probably trying to find, what's the best way to kind of deal with this. So despite best efforts, right, some organizations, of course, may be still struggling. So what are the best ways to possibly make sure that, employees are staying focused and connected with the organization and their team members?
Yeah, so early intervention is going to be paramount. It's the key. So we need managers to be available to employees, and corporations are encouraged to provide education, training, and access to mental health professionals. So we need to remember that people react to different stressors in different ways, and there's going to be people who are more resilient than others. We just need to provide education and support. Those are huge.
Yep. I know, Dr. Moetti, I was talking to a client actually a couple of days ago, and looking at the virtual social gathering and kind of what Nick was also saying a little bit earlier. One thing a client was telling me that they did is they would basically block 2 hours of everybody's calendar. I think they did it once a month, if I remember correctly. And everybody would just, chime in and just log in, and everybody would just turn on their cameras if they wanted to. And some people would work, some people would just chat like they would normally at the office. And I know for them, that was like a really nice thing and something that a lot of employees really, really liked. So that was something that they done that I thought was a pretty good practice for just kind of having more of a social gathering as a group as well. In your opinion, Dr. Moetti, what are some things that, leaders can do to make sure that, their employees' remote work culture continues to be good? And, I know you were talking a little bit about the resource piece, but what could they do to kind of make sure, that employees are having the best experience they possibly could?
Sure. So as managers, we need to ask ourselves, what am I doing to encourage interactions outside of day-to-day meetings so that our staff don't feel isolated? They are working remotely. So kind of like what I was saying earlier, leaders need to ensure that the organization is providing support and training for those who are struggling. And we need to remember early intervention is key. We need to, again, create clear policies and expectations. By setting clear policies and expectations around when people are going to be expected to work, the length of time they're going to need to work, and how often they need to communicate or check in with managers, these can help relieve some of the stressors associated with working remotely. If possible, we are encouraging to allow employers to give employees flexible work schedules. Most of the research on the positive effects of remote work have to do with providing the employee the option to either working remote or coming in. Certain personality types are going to prefer working remotely. If your organization is able, allow the employee to have autonomy over their schedules. Some people work better at night, some people work better during the day. If we do live in an area where there is stay-at-home orders, and again, they have family, the day when, if the kids are around, if the spouse is around, it may not be conducive to a good working environment. So if we do have the ability to allow them to work, to have autonomy over their schedules, that again is going to help with productivity, retention, and just healthier mental health.
Yeah, no, those are great points. I think kind of Nick was talking a little bit about that, but I think the flexibility at the end, if they're getting their work done, I think that's the most important thing. So flexibility, I think also just kind of builds maybe a sense of trust for them as well. So I think those are great points, Dr. Moetti. So I know, Dr. Moetti, earlier you were talking a little bit about, us as humans and just employees. It's important to feel a sense of belongingness, right? So for people that may be struggling with this during remote work, what would you say they could do to kind of help create that kind of a culture or experience for employees?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So this is going to be done. This is best done by just asking the employees. Allow those in your organization to have a voice and have them feel heard. Have staff provide suggestions. You can create a survey tool that allows your staff to vote on ways that they think or they believe will increase their sense of belongingness.
Those are great points. Nick, have you guys at ATC at all done any sort of surveys or anything of that nature to kind of, get employees' thoughts on things like that before? Or what are some best practices that you guys usually do?
Yeah, we haven't done surveys, but we have done group calls where we have asked people for ideas to be better engaged. And we got a lot of ideas from the staff on things that they would like to do to be better engaged, especially because, as a lot of us know, and in our company in particular, we've been hiring a fair amount of people over the last few months as well. And when they start and they're remote and they don't meet anybody for quite a bit of time, it's hard to feel engaged. It's hard to connected. It's hard to feel, like you're truly a part of a team that you don't really know or met outside of the screen. And so we have them for ideas, and they've given a fair amount of ideas of just ways to connect that are more low key, more just fun, obviously, so that they can kind of each other. And when we've been introducing new employees on these calls, we now go to great lengths to introduce them and their hobbies, things that they care about, things that they're comfortable, sharing with other people, of course. But, really trying to give more of a profile where before we would just introduce them into their new role, who they'll be reporting to, where they'll be working out of, things like that, just to kind of help others to be able to cross-connect amongst themselves as well.
No, that's great, Nick. And then Mike, just kind of wanted to hear from your end as well, because I know you work quite closely with lots of leaders and managers at various organizations and with various different industries. Just kind of what are some things that you have heard clients doing, or from a training perspective, any key things that you have seen maybe an increase on that have been able to kind of help leaders? Because I always kind of like say, sometimes it's like things that sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So have you noticed any increase for, leaders trying to do these kinds of things to be able to help employees? Or
Yes, anytime you can hear your employees, and they're going to be the ones that have the best ideas. They're on the front lines. They're the ones that are experiencing it. So if you can listen to them, you'll get one such client, a large tech company, was listening to their employees, and it didn't come out directly, but it was that transition time from I'm home, I'm doing home activities, to I'm work. Typically, when we were working in the office, that was when you were in your car, you were on the bus, you were headed to work, and it was your commute. But not having a commute from your bedroom to your office or to the kitchen table or wherever you're sitting didn't give their employees time to wrap their minds around and kind of prepare their minds to go to work and to start engaging in those type of activities. And the same thing, leaving work and coming home straight to the dinner table, dealing with homework, dealing with all those other things, made it challenging. And so what this company did is they institute a 15-minute virtual remote at the beginning of the day and end of the day. And then they provided resources to those employees so that they could go and listen to an audiobook, they could go learn something, they could go do a session of yoga, anything like that, to just help their mind transition from home and life to work and responsibilities, projects and duties, and so forth. And I found that really effective.
No, that's great. Thank you, Mike. Dr. Moetti, just kind of wanted to hear a little bit. I know in California and some other places as well, I know you're kind of dealing with it personally yourself, but how do you deal with staying at home orders and staying connected with your team and other members?
Yeah, so a lack of social interaction, it's going to cause significant negative effects. And this includes anxiety, depression, which is going to result in disruptions in sleep, impaired executive functioning, accelerated cognitive decline, and it can even lead to poor cardiovascular function. So we're wired for connectedness. It's why when you look at environments like maximum security prisons, where inmates are surrounded by violent criminals, the worst punishment for them is placing them in something we call ADSEG, or administrative segregation. So the stressor with this is not working remotely, it's isolation from others, which is why it's crucial for people to connect with others. And that can even be, virtually works too. So yeah, for us being in California, we are currently on stay-at-home orders. And then someone in the chat box had just mentioned that they live somewhere where it's winter, so it's too cold to go outside. It is very isolating. It's our perception of isolation. It's not legitimate isolation. It's our perception of feeling alone that causes these negative effects. So we can mediate this by connecting to others, either via Zoom to have conversations with friends and family, coworkers. We could do remote happy hours. One of the things that we've done here is the hospital that I work at, we've gotten Oculus Quest headsets where people go on VR and they interact in that sense, play games, participate in different type of social activities that you would do in person, like little card games. It really doesn't matter what. Another option is like the Peloton bicycle. That's a way to exercise, but you're also connecting to a group of people, so everyone's doing the same activity. We need to connect, and if we can't connect physically, virtually is just as good if our perception of that is that we are connected.
Those are great points, Dr. Moietti. Just curious, in your opinion, although, because, when you're meeting through Zoom or any of these like virtual platforms like we are doing today, right? You're not able to see, people face to face, so you don't have that physical touch piece. Do you think that, since people don't have that, would that still not fill in that, I guess, almost like emotional or that void of loneliness or some of the things that people may be going through?
Yeah, again, it's all about their perception. If they so you can be surrounded by people physically and you can feel completely alone. You could be just by yourself, and if you're content and your perception is that you are connected or that you have everything that you need, I mean, that's just, you're not going to struggle. Our perception is what matters.
No, that's great. And the last but not least, I did want to, we will leave, I forgot to mention in the beginning, but we will leave some time for everybody to kind of ask some questions from everybody as well. But I did want to ask you, Dr. Moietti, in your opinion, do you think that, with the way that the crisis is going, do you think that how our organization is going to cope with the new normal as a whole?
Yeah, so remote work is here and it's likely to not go away. The negative effects of remote work is an area where it's developing research still. So as more data is gathered and analyzed, more specific best practices for remote work are going to be available. I can speak personally about myself. I've been working remotely since the pandemic, or majority of my work has gone remote, and I love it. I've been doing very well with the remote work. But again, not everybody's going to be able to function as well. What we need to do again is pay attention to those who are struggling, offer resources, and offer support.
Perfect. Mike, just curious, I know, again, for you with working with some companies, have you had an experience where maybe some clients, for instance, they've never been remote before and they'd transition to full remote? What are some resources or things that they're doing to provide to employees when it comes to training, or any other tools that they're utilizing to be able to help employees out to kind of adjust to it?
Yeah, no, their mental health awareness training wasn't on many people's radars before 2020 until this pandemic hit. And now that it's there, a lot of companies are scrambling to say, how do we provide training to our leaders so that they're aware and know how to engage and know what to be discussing and talking about with their employees? And then how do we provide opportunities for our employees to disconnect, right? What are some activities that they can be doing, whether it's virtual learning, whether it's physical exercise or connection, and they're scrambling to do so. And unfortunately, it's also during the midst of a pandemic when costs are being cut and expenses are tight. And so that's a significant challenge. But if you can tap into what you already have available at your fingertips and ask and see if there's training opportunities, or see if there's resources available from the providers that you're currently working with, and it might surprise you what they've developed or created.
No, that's great, Mike. And then Nick, for you guys training wise, for ATC specifically, have you guys shifted to anything that, so I know for you guys did already have some employees that were remote, but were there any significant changes that you guys did to kind of help adjust employees that maybe had not worked remote before? Or
So one of the things that we want to make sure, and this is the same thing that we tell companies, is for people to successfully work at home, you got to make it easy from a technology standpoint. And so you need to make sure that the technology that you give them works, that if it does go down, they know immediately how to deal with it, and how to get things back up, because that's really what it's taking for people. And so a lot of the training that we're giving is not only around our software and our technologies and the things that we go to market with and all of that, but it's also how to get in touch with the right person at the right time for issues, so they don't feel like they don't know who to go to, who to reach out with. So we want to make things as easy as possible for people working from home to connect and get the work done that they want. And we want to make sure that we're providing all of that to them, and then have training available for them. And of course, through Auzmor is what we're using in order for them to be able to access it at any time in case they forgot how to do certain things. Because a lot of times what we forget when we're in an office with folks is it's not too hard to walk over to somebody's desk and say, hey, could you show me how to do that again in Salesforce or SAP or whatever it is that you may be doing. And now that you don't have that person's desk that you can walk over to, but you still have all these processes, all these things that need to get done. You have new employees coming into the organization. You need to have ways of being for them to be able to access that knowledge, access that training, and get that get those walkthroughs, if you would, in those SOPs quickly and easily. And that for us has been probably one of the bigger focuses.
No, that's great, Nick. I know that's something that I've kind of been hearing a little bit about too is, employee, it's not like you're next to your colleague anymore where you could ask a question, right? You have to call or find a way to communicate. So I think kind of having a way to maybe provide those resources to employees to kind of go to, hey, this is kind of where they could go to get everything, and then if they weren't able to find it, then of course reach out to somebody, but just having any other way so then they're not waiting on other people all the time. So that's great. Perfect. So I wanted to leave, I think those were kind of the main things that we had for today's agenda that we wanted to cover for everybody. I do want to leave some time for questions. So I'm actually just looking at the Q&A piece. Feel free to comment with your question, but I see a couple of questions that we can actually go through. So the first one, I think, I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name, but Seiskal, I think, said, are there techniques we can share to help those change their perception of digital distance despite online interaction? Dr. Moetti, would you like to kind of maybe add your opinion on that or add your thoughts on that first?
Yeah, it's just exposure. The more we do something, because if you look at the brain, we are very habitual beings. We like our routine. When the routine changes, it's going to be difficult to adapt, and some people are going to be less resilient or more resilient to that. If we can keep exposing them to that, to the new norm, and we're able to address issues that come up, and we just are supportive of them with time, and what the research is showing is that 30 to 45 days is what it takes for us to get into a new habit or a new routine. So if we can push through that initial 30 to 45 days, it does become easier. That's
perfect. And then I see a question from Yvonne. Is it common to participate? Is it common practice for a company to mandate weekly of the work of employees has completed when working remote? I think the question was, is it a common practice for companies to mandate weekly of kind of what employees are completing, when employees are working remote? Nick, do you want to take that one, or is that something with your experience that you've seen commonly, or?
Yeah, I mean, more and more so now. Again, when the things that we're doing have milestones and benchmarks that have to be hit, and there's certain dates attached to those, and then we have kind of a red, yellow, green, so we know where things are at, on time. Because we have, we're delivering pretty large projects for companies, and so that, and also internally for ourselves, so that becomes really important. But I also notice, even again, we work around a lot of insurance companies here, and so one of the things that I had noticed even before the pandemic was they were allocating a certain amount of work based on the position that people were in. And while it didn't work for everybody, it did work for some. And so they would give them, we'll just say a caseload, if you will. And they had to process this amount of a caseload within a given time frame of a week. And they didn't care when they did it. They could do it on the weekend if they could get it all done on the weekend. But they did need to report in where they were at and what is going on. And I think that's normative. People want that structure. The accountability kind of needs to be there. And sometimes if people kind of fall into the distraction or procrastination piece, knowing that they're going to have a given accountability, twice a week or something like that, is part of that structure and motivation and walls, if you will, that I think helps keep people motivated and keep them on track.
Yep, no, that's a great point, Nick, because people are not in front of us anymore. So no, I think it's definitely a good accountability piece for sure. Dr. Moetti, just curious, what are, in your opinion, what are your thoughts on maybe like a weekly report?
Yeah, I really agree with what Nick just said. To add to that, kind of like back to what I was saying earlier, if we have clear expectations and the employees know what is expected and when it is expected, that's going to help out a lot. And not just with different assignments that are due, but also with check-ins. When we're in the office, we're able to interact and see different staff members, different supervisors. But when we're working remote, what is the expectation there? If that is clear that they need to check in a specific amount of times, it gets rid of the ambiguity. The less ambiguity, the less stress, the less anxiety.
Yep, no, that's great. Perfect. And then I think Diana has a great question here. What steps can we set for ourselves to set the example? Which is a great one, Diane, because we as leaders, of course, are the examples for our employees. So Nick, just I want to kind of hear a little bit of what everybody thinks. But Nick, what are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting. And that's a great question. It's a really good question because it's something I've thought about quite a bit because I speak at a lot of HR conferences, SHRM conferences about, technology and its impact on life and people in general. But this period of time in particular, it used to be work-life balance that everybody was searching for. And, I used to joke that, the first word is work. So because without that, everything else isn't going to happen. But now we're moving more towards a work-life integration. And I don't know that that's a good thing. Somebody had made a comment about, kind of this mashed potato thing of everything kind of blending. And it kind of reminded me of that, moving towards work-life integration is not necessarily a great thing. And I remember reading a study, I think it was from MIT Sloan, about these companies that give unlimited vacation. And I'll go back because I remember this question was being asked. And people that had unlimited vacation were also more hesitant to take vacation because they didn't feel like they earned it. They didn't feel like they deserved it because it was just given to them and it was unlimited. And they were more likely to take vacation when it was something that they had earned in it, and that it was theirs, that it was theirs to have. So I think, again, we have to set an example as leaders by taking time off, by not being accessible at certain times, because these are the times when I'm with my family, or these are the times that I'm off. Again, we are so connected, and we sometimes wear it as a badge of honor and valor to be totally accessible, to be responding to email at midnight. Like, look at me, I'm responding at midnight. I'm here for this, right? And I think we have to do a lot of intention about making sure our employees understand what our real tangible expectations are of them as it pertains to them being available to responding to us, and knowing that it's okay for them to take time off and to do things. At my last organization, we had quite a few thousand numbers of employees. One of the things that I really wanted to make sure to all my VPs and managers that reported to me was, do not do not light up your employees on a Friday if you've got a problem with something that they're doing or something that's going on. Do not send them into the weekend or even into the evening with that kind of weight on them. It's just not fair to them, and it's nothing that cannot be fixed, on a Monday or during regular hours. So I think just really setting the tone and being intentional about it and reinforcing it with the employees, I think is really important.
That's great, Nick. And I think those were all great points. Dr. Moetti, just curious to kind of hear your thoughts on or your opinion on that as well.
I agree with everything that Nick just said. And just to add a little bit more, another thing that managers can do is kind of talk about their own struggles with remote work, talk about their own struggles with disconnecting. We all want to feel like people understand us. And if we're able to verbalize that and kind of do the work through with our employees and tell them what's worked for us and what hasn't, and to kind of create that open dialogue so that it is a work in progress. You're not just going to try one thing and it's going to work, and if it doesn't, then that's it. The open dialogue allows us to try different things, and hopefully we create a good balance.
Yeah, balance is key, like we all say. This is a good question. Are there surveys to identify employees who are re-silent and then try to build re-silent skills? Mike, want to chime in? Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
With regards to resilience, is there an ability to measure that? Is that what the question was?
Yes. Oops, I think I read that wrong. Are there surveys to identify employees who are resilient and then try to build resilient skills?
Yeah, so I can't speak to the tools about identifying someone's resilience, but my understanding or the definition that I've seen that best resonates with me is a rubber band. We're all going to be hit with negative stuff, right? We're going to experience garbage during the day, but how quickly are we able to snap back to where we are and begin being productive and effective in our jobs versus struggling with the challenges? As far as developing resilient skills, there's lots of different training programs, courses to help people learn new skills, because being resilient working from home is different than helping develop resilience in the office place. It's just different. And one of my favorite training programs comes from one of our training providers, Will Interactive. They've got a really good course that shows on a Zoom meeting what an actual team meeting might look like in this new COVID world, and it walks them through the different skills that they can use to adapt to each individual person, because each individual has their unique situation, and a manager needs to be able to be deliberate, be intentional, and understand that employee from where they're at and exhibit and demonstrate trust that, one, they can get their job done in this new way, and that we're willing to support them and give them the tools and resources that they need to be successful.
That's great. Those are good points. Definitely, I agree. I think Will Interactive is great. Nick, anything you'd like to add on to that?
No, I think you covered it well. Actually, I think it's really tough. Resilience is key and definitely needed, but I don't know that you can measure it. I think you could probably find some assessments out there from companies like Pearson that probably have some type of a quotient for that they might be able to get to. They give you maybe some insight, but I don't know that that's something that's really truly measurable from folks.
Yep, no, for sure. I see another question here. I think some people put in the webinar chat. So if I missed anybody's that put in the webinar chat, my apologies, but I do see one. Are managers being offered training in terms of how to work with their employees when they can't physically see them in the office? How will they react when they think they are losing control by those who work from home? That's a good question. I think, Nick, do you want to kind of maybe chime in a little bit on that?
For us, it's a little bit different, simply because I think it depends on the managers. Again, you really got to work with your managers because a lot of times, if they, it depends on how that manager's trained. It depends on the manager's mindset on certain things. on how they're going to react when they feel like they're out of control. Some people will go to micromanagement mode. Some people will go to managing through fear and innuendo of, you're going to lose your job if you don't do this or you don't do that, because there's again, and if you feel like you're on an island and you feel like you're not in control, sometimes you're going to lash out, and it's not going to be in the right way. It's not going to be a negative way. It's not going to be in a positive way to try to get solutions, results, or even understanding of what may really be going on, or try to get clarification. And so I really think it just comes down again to training and making sure managers understand if they're feeling that way, what is the proper way to respond? What is the best way to work with your employees, with your staff, with your teams, to make sure you feel like you're either getting the most productivity and throughput out of them that you should be getting, and that that's realistic, and that you don't have unrealistic expectations, and that you're managing them correctly, and not over managing, under managing people to frustration, so that they end up quitting, because hopefully that's not what people are after.
Yep. Mike, do you want to add anything to that from a training perspective?
Other than training's good. Nope.
Yes, no, I agree. I think, just equipping leaders and, making sure that managers understand things are also really important as well. I think I see. Okay, so this is a good question. As a job seeker, how do you get companies to embrace remote workers? Dr. Moetti, your thoughts on this?
Well, if the company is forced into a situation where they need to use remote workers, prepare, know the IT work, ask the right questions, ask what the expectations are, what the hours are going to be, how often did you need to check in, how quickly do you need to respond to emails. By asking these types of questions during the interview process, it shows the employer that you understand the positives and the negatives of remote work, and these are things that you're thinking about and contemplating, and it just better prepares you for the interview.
No, that's great. Nick, do you have you had experiences where maybe in your previous experiences with other organizations, have you had it to where maybe a team had not worked remote at all, and then maybe transitioned, and had they just maybe from employee feedback or anything of that nature, and has that been beneficial? Or
I think it got beneficial over time. Initially, at least for, I know a few that I could think of, it was a struggle right away, because again, they were used to being able to get together on a moment's notice and whiteboard an idea or a solution to a problem that they've run into while creating some kind of technical solution for a company of some sort. And not all the technology was readily available to be able to just digitally whiteboard, and now that has come out. So I think technology is becoming more of an enabler and a helper to some of those things. But initially, it was a little bit of a struggle for some to say, okay, now we're doing this and now we're doing that. And I think it's more important than ever that employees have lines of open communication. If they don't feel like they can discuss with their manager, what is another line of communication that they can take without fear of repercussions if they decide to pull that lever for whatever reason? I think that's going to become more critically important in order to keep employees engaged, especially if, and with a job my son's getting ready to start in January. I mean, he works in IT. He's getting ready to start with a company. He'll be 100% remote. He won't meet anybody. He'll be remote as far as he knows the entire length of his job. And I think that's going to be really difficult because you never really get to know people the way you do when you get to sit down with them over coffee or over lunch and chat with them, look them in the eye, and that piece is going to be missing. So I think that's going to be interesting as well. But technology is helping, but I think they do have to have lines of communication if things start to feel a little off and they don't feel comfortable talking maybe to their direct supervisor.
Yep, no, that's great, Nick. I think we're right on time. We have about a minute. This webinar was recorded today. I forgot to mention in the beginning. So I will follow up with the deck for a resource as well as the recording with everybody. So our team will get that to you in a couple of days. And then also just kind of wanted to mention, we'll have this resource page attached for everybody as well. If you guys have any questions or if we could be of any resource, feel free to reach out. But we appreciate everybody's time today. And more than anything, we hope that this was just a good resourceful time to kind of hear about some good practices from everybody. But hope everybody has a good day today. And thank you so much for your time, Mike, Dr. Moyetti, and Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Z.
Thank you, Z.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.